Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. Today we are going to be talking about the wired side of things, since wired infrastructure really provides the support for Wi-Fi. And what we want to do is talk about wired assurance with Juniper EX switches, because they have there's an interesting technology here that will help us as Wi-Fi engineers tremendously as we try to troubleshoot and make sure everything's working. So in this episode, we have Francois Vergès, our co-host. How are you doing, Francois?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And then we have Sujit Ghosh. I hope I said that correctly.
Yep.
How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. And then we also have Abi, who's on. These two are the key guys for this technology. And then we also have UC. So UC will chime in every once in a while, I assume.
Hey guys, here to interrupt whatever important discussion is going on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And of course, UC has to be here because he's one of the most long-standing guests on the show.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, we have many episodes with you on here already. So it's you and Robert Boardman. So I think you're ahead of them now.
Yeah.
And then Albie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Roel. Thank you for bringing us on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves, let everyone know who you are and what you do over at Juniper, starting with Sujit.
Hi, my name is Sujit Ghosh. I'm a principal technical marketing engineer in Juniper on the AI-driven campus side of the business. So I'm responsible for defining the architecture for campus networks for Juniper and doing the wired wireless integration on a Mist cloud, working closely with Avi on bringing EX switches to the Mist cloud.
All right.
Awesome. My name is Abhi Shamsundar. I'm part of the product management team at Mist Juniper. Primarily focused currently on bringing wired and WAN to the AI world into the Mist frame of things. We've always had a platform for us to ingest telemetry and give out good data. Now we're bringing the wired and WAN pieces as well together here. So that's the primary focus currently.
Awesome. And Jussi?
Hey everybody, I'm Jussi. I'm the Wi-Fi janitor at Mist, or actually Juniper AI-driven enterprise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And so we start off this conversation again about talking about wired assurance. And I think a lot of people might want to know, what exactly is wired assurance? Maybe that we should start there. Some of us know that this technology on the wired side of things and the switches is going to be brought over to the Mist dashboard. So if you configure your wireless via the Mist dashboard or any dashboard, this would also encompass the switches, but a lot more, because you talk about wired assurance. So what does that mean to a Wi-Fi person, a Wi-Fi expert, or someone who may be interested in using this dashboard?
Absolutely. I'll take that role. So one of the key contributions for Mist success, even when we started off with wireless, was the ability to ingest telemetry and bring in a ton of data to the cloud, crunch all the numbers for you, and give you exactly the distilled information as to being able to answer those questions from the SLE framework, the service level expectation framework, or even you asking Marvis some natural language questions. Beginning from the wireless, we now knew the most important aspect for a stable wireless network is also a good wired networking space. Now we exactly did this the same venture out here by being able to ingest telemetry and bring about exactly the issues that plague your network. So when we started with wireless, you've all seen how there has always been answers for you in terms of how's your wireless network doing from a client's perspective, be it whether the problem is with roaming or be it the problem being the capacity on the device. All of these were answered immediately from the framework. Now, we took the same top problems from the wired network and we chose to answer those questions in a proactive sense so that the users can actually go make changes well before a user opens a ticket. And that's the entire intent of wired infrastructure. And we all know how important wired infrastructure is for any wireless networking to work well. And that was the intention, and also the primary motivation going behind wired networks, and wired assurance was thus born.
Okay. And so now that we got that out of the way, Mist, prior to the Juniper acquisition, was very focused on Wi-Fi. So what did that look like as you got acquired by Juniper? I assume they were like, hey, we want you to do this for our switches as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. So even when we are doing wireless, we always had an eye for trying to identify issues, even if it was a layer above us. We said your DHCP wasn't working well, your scope is DHCP scope probably is out, and all of such issues. Even when we were doing just plain wireless network, we also had an eye for areas above us, saying if your switch, let's say you have 4 SSIDs requiring 4 different VLANs, but if your switch on the other end actually was provisioned with only 3 of them, it manifested as a wireless problem. You black hole the VLAN, but the issue was at a layer above. So we started tracking issues at a layer above, even with just wireless. And with the Juniper acquisition, it was just pouring rocket fuel into that intent. So it was for us now to be able to say you're missing a VLAN, but also your cables may be bad, your configuration on the MPU is bad. Things of that nature is what that helped us to solve wireless problems was one of the major incentive. And now as we went along, we figured we could solve more problems and identify more problems. And hence, I think the Juniper acquisition just was absolutely organic more than a push through.
Okay.
And just to add on to this, I think another driving force is customers wanted a single pane of glass for kind of troubleshooting what is going on in the network in terms of it's not only about wireless, it's all about wired, and then comes the WAN part. And that's the journey we are on. So customers say that I couldn't make a Zoom call, how it is failing, where it is failing, how is the network doing, is it on the wireless side, on the switch side, or on my WAN side? I think that's the journey which we started with wireless, and then we went to wired, and then going towards WAN. So I think it was all about a customer driving us, saying that we need a single pane of glass where we can go in and see all this information. And that's kind of also another driving force. And with the extensive telemetry available in Junos, I think that's very much possible, and we are taking advantage of that.
Okay. And when you brought in, when Juniper came in and started talking to you about this, you started looking into Junos. And for those of you guys who haven't touched Junos before, I highly recommend at least taking a look. Juniper's got some labs on their website that you could sign up for. So maybe I'll include a link there so you can take a look. But what was it like working with initially getting this information from Junos and porting it into the dashboard? Did you guys find it challenging, or did you look at it and go, wow, this is a lot easier than I thought?
Yeah, that's a really good question. At the point when we were introduced to the fact that we were able to now have the ability to get insights into switches, our first intent was to see how easy is it for us to grab information from the switches? And that's where I think the power of Junos came into picture. We all understood switching as a technology. It was now about the semantics to get information back to the cloud. And Junos is super powerful. It provided a very secure way of us to be able to get data. The higher end switches support JTI, the lower end switches support outbound SSH, both of them extremely secure for us to gather information. So for me, I understood the switching technology well, but understanding semantics was, it always takes, it's a learning curve when you start off, but I have come to appreciate how powerful this OS has been, and it has saved my tail a bunch of times when I fat fingered a few things, and all of that power was also now induced into the management platform as well. For example, we were talking pre-show as well. If you fat fingered anything, including your default gateway, you lose your switch. And how to get out of it very simply, Junos provides immense power for you to for situations like this. And learning about these as we went along the journey is what made both our management profile. Our management story extremely useful, as well as robust as we went along.
And we really took advantage of that situation, how the commit process is done in Junos. As a result, when we do any commit, and in case we lose connectivity from the cloud to the switch, we roll back within 10 minutes, so that we will never leave back a switch stranded in the field if some configuration is pushed and there was something wrong in the configuration and it didn't get affected. Like Abhi talked about our experiences with the default gateway, simple thing, but it might force you to drive down to the customer site and get that fixed. But with this, you can roll back in, say, 10 minutes from the cloud. We have implemented it, so the switch will roll back to the previous configuration and join back the cloud. So bottom line is we will never leave a switch stranded in the field.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've actually experienced that integrating my Juniper switch into my Mist account multiple times, because I had issues configuring my uplink to integrate with my firewall. And my Juniper switch kept rebooting every 10 minutes. I was like, what's going on? And then I figured it out. I was like, okay, that's this confirm commit thing happening. And then I was actually trying to better understand how it was working. And from what I understood, there is like a SSH session between the Mist cloud and the switch. And that's how you guys push your configurations, the set commands, back to the switch. And that's how that configuration is happening between the cloud and the switch. So obviously the switch will need to have internet access, gateway configured, and DNS, as far as I understand.
Yeah, there are a few prerequisites. Like any type of a cloud deployment, you have to get an IP address to the switch. Inside that IP address from a DHCP server, make sure that the DHCP DNS address is provided. Some DNS address internally or externally, some DNS address provided. Make sure that the switch has the right clock on it, because we are dealing with certificates in this case to build up that secure tunnel. And we use TCP a port. It's a netconf over SSH, so TCP port 2200 should be open outbound for the switches to talk to the internet. There are certain companies who might block that port and all, so it's always good to know that if you take care of these things, the switches will be able to talk to the cloud easily and go through the ZTP process and provision the switches very quickly. It takes less than a minute or two for the switches to join the cloud, and then cloud takes over the switch and you can do all the configurations from the cloud.
Okay. I think that's an important topic for someone to know if they're going to bring on Juniper switches. So going back, we had talked about if you had misconfigured the switch in the dashboard and you lose connectivity, there's a rollback feature. So for those who don't understand Junos just yet, there is a functionality where if you misconfigure the switch, instead of just saving it to the running configuration, there's something called a commit confirmed. And so what that means is you type in commit confirmed, and you would see whether or not that configuration stuck, right? You see if there's any issues, or maybe you lost connectivity. But if you do not issue another commit with, by default, 10 minutes, it'll roll back the configuration, the previous configuration. Now that's different from reloading the whole switch. So some of you guys may know about other vendors where you have to reload the switch in order to bring back that configuration. This just rolls back whatever you had committed to configuration. It removes it. So you don't fully reboot the switch and then everyone loses connectivity. So I like that you actually implement that into the dashboard, because I find that if you're just using a dashboard, it may be very easy to accidentally reconfigure the uplink port, for example. Maybe you missed out a VLAN, or you changed it from a trunk to an access port. So having that rollback functionality, I think, is really good. And then you touched upon the security aspect, because we are having a switch now talk to the cloud, which you mentioned was via SSH, but then you also implement certificates, which is why you need to have NTP. And then I'm assuming there's probably a range of IP addresses that the security guy might want to just allow only ZTP and SSH from the cloud into that internal infrastructure IP address.
Yeah, so those are documented in the Juniper as well as Mist websites. The actual string, it's called OC-term. So you can open up the ports along with that. So we have those all documented, what ports are needed on the Juniper website, and which URL actually the devices are talking to. So if you just need to specifically open up the ports for those sites, it's all well documented. So definitely we went through the same process within Juniper also. When we have any switches in our labs to go and connect to the Mist cloud, we had to go through the same policies with InfoSec internally to open up the right ports, etc. So yes, these are all documented in Mist as well as Juniper websites.
Okay, great. And because I think that'll be a big question for a lot of people when
yes,
there's still a lot of people who are reluctant to go to the cloud because of security, but there are ways to secure. I mean, we access a lot of things via internet, so it can be secured. And then I
think that was the case about 6-7 years back when networking and cloud was not. But I think it started with a journey with Meraki going down that path, and people started getting comfortable with it. So I'm seeing about a 50-50 thing in the industry, that a lot of customers, a lot of their CIOs have policies that they have to adopt the cloud, and things are changing over in the industry. I would say there's still a 50-50 or maybe lesser, 70-30% of the companies are adopting towards the cloud, especially when we are talking about AI and artificial intelligence and ML. It's impossible to do without cloud, because the amount of data you need, and not only your data, the amount of data you need from other organizations, so that you can correlate and give that information. So I think there's a shift in the industry happening, and I think it started with the Meraki introduction, and now everything is in cloud. And you understand or not, or you realize or not, if you're using Microsoft 365 or Office 365, you are using cloud. There are so many applications you are using already in the cloud.
Everyone's emails in the cloud. We're fully utilizing the cloud.
It's like Meraki did a fantastic job kind of introducing this in a soft way through the small businesses. Like that's where, this kind of innovation has to start from anyway, because it's, less strict on the security side and things like that. And now Mist is kind of changing the game now for the first time, I guess, for the enterprise, like large enterprise, large business side of things as well. So not only is cloud anymore for the small business.
Yeah, and enterprises with large deployments, thousands of switches, thousands of APs around, and soon the WAN numbers will be providing this data. And all with the data, you can do all kinds of analysis, which is way ahead. Mist is already on a fourth or fifth generation of AI engine, which is kind of leading, where we can now just do natural language queries to find out how is my wired network doing, how is my wireless network doing, how is who are all my unhappy users, who are all my happy users. If you want to, sometimes we want to talk to the happy guys also, it's not always the unhappy ones, right? so yeah, I think that Mist is way ahead in terms of the AI engine for the campuses and for the large networks. We are talking about thousands of APs and thousands of switches.
So you are talking about these large scale deployments. So tell us about the scale, because you had mentioned ZTP, which is zero touch provisioning. Is it truly zero touch? Like I have all these switches on a pallet. Now I got to get these all configured, but they're all going to go to different sites. How does that work? Because typically I have to unbox every single one. I have a configuration for each one that I need to manually load on there, right? I type my config or copy and paste my config for each switch. Each one's labeled. They go to site A. This one goes to site B. How much do you really have to touch these switches in this dashboard?
That's a really, really good question, Raul. So in terms of us being able to, how we went about this process is exactly the same way that we did with the Mist APs. Mist APs today are truly zero touch. You can send all of them are in boxes. They can either be, claimed at the point of install or claimed well ahead in advance. But the switches, I think we've gone one step further. When you order your switches, Roel, you'll probably get, let's say you ordered 100 switches. All of them need to go to 10 different sites, let's say. But you have one activation code. We started the automation right from the word when you order and you place your PO. To your PO, you get an activation code, and all of your 100 switches can all be automatically ported onto your Mist dashboard using just that one activation code. Now, having said that, all of these devices now are on your dashboard. You can place them to their according to the sites that are appropriate to them on day minus n. Let's say considering day 0 is when you actually rack and stack those devices. Now, day minus n, you now have the ability to configure all of these different switches even before they have been ever racked or stacked. Now you configure all of these switches and in their corresponding sites whenever the installers go ahead and plug in those devices. You power up the devices, you plug in any of your ports, be it management or any of your revenue ports, the front 12 or 48 ports that you may have. So that's a key difference, that you can plug into any port on that switch and it will automatically go and grab an IP. As long as it has a DNS, it'll reach out to the cloud, get its config. Very similar to how the Mist AP works, it'll start beaconing the SSIDs after its boot up. The same process was introduced into the Mist switches as well. It boots up, it goes to the cloud, gets its config. You can plug in an AP after a complete boot up process, and you'd be able to beacon and also pass traffic across all VLANs. So to answer your question, how truly ZTP it is, on a very well planned setup, you wouldn't have to touch or go into the switch to make any sort of configurations over console for it to come on board. It can be as seamless as you plugging in an AP, you just plug in the switch.
Okay.
So
go ahead, Francois.
I was going to ask, all the prerequisite we talked about earlier, the DNS being configured on the switch, all of that is kind of pre-loaded when you buy a switch, a Juniper switch.
I think that comes from DHCP, right?
It comes from DHCP.
Okay.
As long as you know
Okay.
it's any internet router today. When you plug in your AP, you probably get a few options. One of them being your default gateway, one of them being your DNS to get out. So we expect exact same processes for the switch as well.
Okay.
And hence, and you would be able to get out to the internet after.
Okay. So the way I see this is really the only hands-on part is somebody just cabling these things together. So they're doing the rack and stack. You have someone on site that has a router and then the switches. Then they plug into the ports that if you guys have a standard set of ports, you go, all right, this is the uplink port. This connects to this router. And then it should get an IP address based on the interface. I'm assuming it's the VLAN 1 interface in which it gets an IP address and all that.
In the Juniper world, it's called IRv0, but
IRv0,
it's the same.
okay.
It's the same interpretation as an SVI VLAN 1.
Okay.
So you're right.
Okay,
and that's assuming it's a brand new switch that have been for the greenfield deployments, right? It's not for the brownfield or older switch, right?
Correct. So for anybody who's already installed a switch, we call them, and if they've already installed and they've been working with the switch for a while right now, so we call those switches the brownfield places. We have an easier adoption route for brownfield switches as well to completely become managed. You place a few lines of configuration. So now that you already have access to the switch, you already have probably SSH connectivity to the switch from wherever you're sitting. Our expectation for you to manage it from the cloud would be to copy and paste a few lines of code straight from our dashboard onto your switch and commit them, and they will be available for you to configure from the dashboard from there on.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because that's what happened to me. I got a switch that was a little older than when you guys started the whole process. So it didn't get automatically. I didn't get a claim code or anything like that, right? So I had to manually go through the process of setting up a console connection to the switch, copy pasting those comments that you get from the Mist dashboard, and have the switch build that connection to the cloud.
Yeah, so similar to how you have on the Mist APs, a concept of the claim code and a QR code at the back of the AP where you can use an app or just type in the claim code in the Mist UI so that the switches are. So we have added that same functionality as Abhi was talking about in the switches. So in the switches now, which is kind of manufactured after, I would say, April of this calendar year, all the EX switches, except few, we are working through those details, have come with when you manufacture them, it will always come with the claim code in front of the switch. Outside of the box, in order to find out if this switch is cloud ready or not, there'll be a sticker showing you that the box is cloud ready. And if you see that sticker now, you know that for sure, if you open up the switch in the front of it, you will see the claim code. So there are two options. Either you can manually add those claim codes for individual switches, or as Abhi mentioned, if you are deploying hundreds of switches, you just get the what we call as the claim code in terms of just one single code, which you can enter into the Mist cloud, and all 100 switches will be adopted. But the key idea over here is, like we have in case of the APs, now the switches come with the claim code. You can easily add them to the dashboard. But at the same time, that's what we are calling as the greenfield method.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you had some switches which were manufactured prior to, say, March of this calendar year, you can still use them as part of the network. In that case, we call that as an adoption process. And you just go to the Mist cloud, generate about 8 lines of code, and copy paste that code onto the console of the switch, and that's it. It will build up that necessary tunnel, assuming that it can talk to the internet. It will build up that netconf over SSH tunnel, and then you can go in the Mist cloud and start managing the switch. You can enable the switch configurations from the switch. So in case of a brownfield environment, that means the switch which doesn't have the claim code on it. So any switch now having the right code as well as the right model of it, we'll be able to join the Mist cloud.
When you migrate to a switch from being managed via CLI to the cloud, is it an either or do you still have the ability to log into the switch via CLI?
You do have the ability to log into the switch via the CLI, but we would like for us to have one source of truth for all of your configurations, and that would be the cloud. So if you want to look at something in terms of a switch itself, we don't take away. In fact, we give you the ability to log into the CLI via the web shell from our dashboard. We'd like for you to limit it for looking at stuff by doing show commands, but the configurations are very elaborate and provided from the cloud, and hence it's not either or, but it's from the cloud alone.
Okay, so you're saying you won't be able to make configuration changes via CLI if it's managed in the cloud?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, because I can see where you might create an issue if you make a change via CLI, the cloud doesn't know about it. It would have to query the configuration or something. But you've already cut that off, so the source of truth is in the dashboard once it's been adopted there.
Yeah. That is correct.
And I think it's nice. As I was studying a little bit more of the Junos OS, what I did on my switch is I added a couple of CLI commands that would just create a user for me, so I could just establish that SSH connection and just SSH into the switch and run some show commands. And there's like on the Mist dashboard, there's like a section that's called additional CLI commands, so you could actually add more config to the switch if you wanted to. So it gives you that flexibility, even though the switch is managed by Mist now.
Oh yes, that's the huge flexibility which we have provided, because Junos is so extensive and it's been there for so many years, and thousands and thousands of configuration and options over there. You might be liking something. In case of the new world, for example, syslog and SNMP. If you're still using syslog and SNMP in your system, probably you can use this additional CLI commands in Mist, where you can add those commands, and that will be pushed from the cloud to your switches. But if you're not interested in SNMP and syslog, you can avoid those. But in case you absolutely need it, because of your own audit purposes, etc., you can always add those additional commands from the CLI template, which we provide globally into all switches into the network. So that's kind of taking advantage of the Junos operating system, and there are nuances added onto it, where you can have some global CLI commands, some switch specific CLI commands, and how we can merge those commands for you all, so that you have a comprehensive list of all the CLIs you want to push to your switches, which probably you are not going to have from the cloud itself. So that's the flexibility you have using the CLI templates.
And I like that you mentioned the templates, because this is where you really get to scale everything out, right? You could automate a lot of this configuration just by using templates. So if you have different sites, they have certain configurations, you can push that out via template and not have to log into every single device, CLI into every single device, make those changes, and you make less errors that way. And I would imagine that this is how a lot of the big companies are migrating to the cloud, is by using these templates.
Absolutely. So, Roel, I think let's take a step back. Juniper Mist strategy has been API first. So for us, anything and everything we do in case of configurations and all, we add it to the API first. So we have an API available for everything we do. Let it be wireless, let it be wired. So definitely customers can take advantage of the APIs, and if they are API savvy, to create all these configurations and keep it in the cloud. So as soon as the switch shows up, you can see that, okay, this is a particular serial number of the switch. I want to place this serial number in this area or this site, and I want to push this type of template configurations on it. So you have that option of using APIs to configure this in advance and keep it ready. But if you are not an API savvy, I'm not an expert at all in API, I still use the Mist UI, where we have the concept of the templates, meaning that you can create the day-1 or day-2 templates, which Abhi mentioned earlier in the show, which will basically replicate your configurations, what type of radius servers you have, what type of NTP servers you have, and all your VLANs, etc. in your network, your port channel or AE interface configuration, and then 802.1x related configuration. All of this can be done on this template. And so when a switch shows up in the cloud, immediately it will be placed to the right site, and the right site can be associated with the right configuration. So it's all day-2 activity, which Abhi was referring to. So you can do all this using the UI on the Mist Cloud, or if you are API savvy, you can do all of this with the API, and the APIs are publicly available. And for us, the strategy is API first. Everything will be available in the API, then take it to the UI availability.
Okay. And because you have that AI, I guess now we can talk about some of the benefits of bringing the wired switches into the dashboard and tying it with your Mist APs. So you have if you guys understand what you get with Mist APs, there's this concept of like service level expectations that you get with Wi-Fi. Now you guys are bringing that to the wired side of things. Can you talk more about how that changes or how it's similar it is on the wired switches?
Sure, Royal. So I think the basis for when we started off with the SLEs were also to answer the question: is everything okay on your network, and how is your client's experience from the wireless space? So even if you see the wireless SLEs, it answers two primary questions of any device that's connecting to the wireless network. One, are you able to connect okay? Two, how is your experience after your connection? So we term them as pre-connection and post-connection metrics. So we brought about exactly same concepts to the wired world as well. So we went about bringing in. We went about first off researching with JTAC, which is our tech support for Juniper. We went into the PLM team. We went into few select customers to understand what their primary problems were on a layer 2 and the layer 1 basis. Based on that, we picked up exactly the issues that plague their networks on an everyday basis, and bring about those problems as a part of the SLA framework. So hence you will see the two pieces, pre-connection and post-connection. If you're not able to connect, is it authentication or is it DHCP? If you're able to connect, and if your experience passing traffic, although not as fancy as wireless, wherein you have a lot of variable parameters for you to get, for you to be passing traffic successfully here, you connect your one gig interface to 1 gig NIC on your client, and it should be most times in line with passing traffic. But there are so many issues, as we spoke to a lot of customers as to what they have problems with. The problems start all the way from layer 1, where you have cable problems, where your cable is bad, all the way until even in layer 2, packets being dropped due to MTU being mismatched, or just plain congestion that the interface is not able to handle the traffic at the rate at which it's being sent from the client, identifying uplinks automatically, identifying issues on uplinks after. A ton of these issues were brought about from the SLE framework. So we took the same constructs from the wireless world, the pre-connection and post-connection, moved it to the wired world, and post-connection we have identified these issues and brought them about for both Marvis to answer these questions, and also SLEs to answer the same questions without you having without you having to hunt and peck. Rather, we bringing that out to you from the word go on the SLE screens in a couple of clicks.
Okay, because a lot of these are. I like that you guys interface with the JTAC team, because you now see some of these common issues that people run into on the switch side, and so you've incorporated that into your what do you call it, AI, I guess, right? With understanding where some of these issues might arise, what are the characteristics of these issues, like maybe there's not enough. Some of those are easy ones, like there's not enough PoE right to the port. And so you'd be able to display that pretty easily in the dashboard. And I know I've had issues where some people just didn't know they didn't have enough PoE. They just thought, let me get this switch. It has PoE. I'll plug in every single AP into the switch, and they've exhausted all PoE, but they don't realize that. And so typically some people don't know what the command line version of that is to bring that information up front. But in the dashboard, you can show that easily.
Yes, absolutely. And talking to JTAC about these things, it's always we also consult them to find out some of the best practices, because we look into what are the common JTAC cases we are getting both at level 2, level 3 level. I went through this analysis and came out with, say, top 15, 20 reasons why we are getting cases on the JTAC, and how we can avoid those configuration challenges, etc. So we learn a lot from those interactions. I work with the JTAC members, where we look into some of the best practices which they recommend, which are some of those documentations which are there. But sometimes we miss out some basic configurations, and that lands up with opening cases, etc. So that's when we interacted with them. I provide that information to Abhi, and Abhi tries to incorporate that some of those best practices, so that you don't land up in doing those minor mistakes, but lands up not having the best experience. And especially when Junos is so powerful, you have a lot of options or ways to configure certain features and functionalities. What's the best way to do it? Those are something we are really focusing on, is the best practices coming from the learnings from TAC, etc., and then applying that to the switches. So yes, definitely we are taking advantage of the interaction in the thing. And in future, we might be able to detect that the hardware is going through some churns, it's running out of some memories, or any hardware failures coming up. We should be able to get to a stage where we can say, looks like we are expecting a hardware failure on the switch. Can we do an automatic RMA of the switch, etc.? We do that already for access points. If we see certain issues, certain issues happening repeated, and we are for sure that it's a hardware issue, we can now RMA and access points automatically to you, so that you don't have to go through the process. We're looking at all of those options with now the rich data we are getting from not only one customers, multiple customers. We can always correlate those information. Roel.
What about scenarios where you run into a bug, right? They're known bugs. They're listed on Juniper's website. Are you able to use your technology to figure out this is a bug, this is the bug that it's tied to on the Juniper side, and then push the fix or even recommend the fix?
That is a good question, and that is something that is in process. There's very little I can speak about right now, but that's the intent. We kind of do that in the AP world. We want to bring that about to the switch world as well. There is integrations of systems at the back end. We're not there yet, but at some point in time.
Okay. Because I think that's one of the areas where someone might spend a lot of cycles on, is they've done all the troubleshooting, and then it ends up being a bug. And we all know, like, bugs are going to exist. It's just a matter of how do we get to the end result faster, the fix.
Absolutely.
I have a following question. I guess right now from the MIST dashboard we can onboard and manage Juniper switches. what are the most requested features to be added to what we can do currently for switches in the dashboard?
I think upgrades are definitely a huge one, and that's super close to completion. You should see them. You should see them out very soon. But definitely, upgrades are on top of the list. Another one that had been requested that we planned out way early in our conversation was the ability to automatically detect what kind of device is it connecting to, because we already create what the port profiles, or what you call as personas, be it an AP persona, be it a camera persona. Can we automatically detect these devices instead of you having to go say configure this port to be an AP profile, configure this port to be a camera profile? Can we automatically detect them and then provide them, taking out the human in between for us to configure those switches? And that aspect is something that is actively being worked upon, and that you should see that very soon. We're probably talking about that for the first time on air, but that's definitely one of the most requested when we started off as well, and probably one of the most useful features for us to be able to recognize devices either based on LLDP, some of the radius aspects, either one of those, for you to say, hey, I know it's an AP. It has to be an AP profile. So why wait for the admin to provide you with a profile? I can configure it automatically for you.
Oh, wow. I like that. That is actually really cool.
Yeah, I think there is a underlying kind of this thing where standards, or not standard, I would say, people talk about something called colorless ports and etc. So basically detecting what type of device is connecting and if it's a missed AP or a camera. So using all kinds of information coming back from LLDP on the devices, we can now automatically convert that port to a AP configurations and can make it to a trunk port, allow the necessary VLANs. So it's going towards full automation for deployments where you just keep on plugging things and the network configures itself. And then ultimately we go towards this self-driving network where we talk about where we can now see that some best practices which needs to be done, or changes in configuration needs to be done, and do you want the cloud to do that for you automatically or not? I think that's part of the vision. We do certain things for the wireless network, and now that the switches are managed from the cloud, everything is possible. Everything is possible in terms of going in and changing the configurations to apply those best practices. We are in the very early stages, as IB is talking about, but everything is possible right now. If a customer wants, we can really get into that self-driving motion.
And is that with the Marvis integration on these switches where it can do some of that configuration for you? Like, how do you envision?
Correct.
How do you envision
Marvis
that
is our
doing?
AI engine. Marvis is our AI engine, which is processing millions and millions of data, which is coming from multiple sources and coming up with the scenarios. Yes, Marvis is the AI engine, which is the brain behind this, which will be able to see and compare and see what is missing. For example, if VLANs are missing, or there is an issue with your optics or cables, etc. So the Marvis actions basically takes care of those VLAN missings on certain ports, misconfigured ports, identifying bad cables. These are the areas it's looking at. But we have seen another area where a lot of times customers are deploying hundreds and thousands of switches, and they do have an automation already, but sometimes mistakes happen where you miss out pushing a configuration onto a particular switch. And if you miss out that particular VLAN configuration onto the switch, or some other configuration, or a firewall related configuration on the switch, you land up in a scenario where you have certain switches and APs not having the right VLANs. And if you are associating that VLAN to an SSID, you get into a state where you're not getting IP address on it. in that case, how will you know when you have thousands of switches? And it happened. It happened with many of our customers. I think even with when we started deploying Marvis on Juniper, we found out certain switches which were not having certain configurations on it. So basically, you have a baseline config, and you are deviating from the baseline config. We will be able to fix those or at least highlight to you. And then if you want to go and fix it, you can go ahead and fix it. But at least finding that information when you have thousands of switches have been great value addition to a lot of our customers.
Okay. That sounds good. And going back to the work you guys have already been doing, can you guys share some of the challenges that you have faced integrating the Juniper switches into Mist?
I think the challenges what we saw is with the integration and the availability of a lot of options on Junos and the power of Junos, etc. So there are have simple things how you can configure in multiple ways. There is something called group commands in Junos, very powerful how you do that, and non-group way of configuring commands. Group is, I think, something I learned is another very powerful feature. But that lands up with doing one simple configuration in multiple ways and understanding those configurations, how customers are doing it, and creating that base level configurations, which can be used from the cloud or pushed from the cloud, has been one of the channels, and it's a good learning experience. And now we are at a stage rather started taking advantage of those hierarchies, so that now you can go in and do configurations at a site level, you can do configurations at a network template level, or what we call as a global level, site level, and a switch level. So we give you really the power of saying that you want to configure a radius server for all your switches in a global level or an org level. Then for a particular set of switches which is there on the west coast of the country, you don't want that particular radius server. You have your own radius server on the west coast, and they have better latency, reachability from the switches. Just for those switches, you can configure in a way that the radius servers are reflecting only on those particular switches in the west coast. And then finally, you are the network admin, and you have a new radius server constructed, and you want to test it out in a live environment. Just for one or two switches in your area, you want to use a third radius server. So you can use those configurations and hierarchical ways how we do this and take advantage of it, so that you can have a global level template, then you have a site level template, and then you have a switch specific. And these are some of the hierarchies which we bring in with the power of Junos and using the group commands, etc.
Yeah, and I was actually able to see that when I was configuring my switch, different groups for the different persona Abby was talking about earlier, which is nice, gives you the flexibility. But looking at Junos and how flexible the OS is, I can understand that it could be a challenge to try to find a way to integrate that into the dashboard.
And we learned about that in JNCI Junos, Francois.
Yeah.
Do you remember reading about that part?
Yeah, it's nice. Something we didn't talk about is what if you don't have Juniper switches? Can you still get some telemetry data back into the Mist dashboard?
Are you guys friendly with other
what are
switches?
the limitations of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. It came to my mind, and then we started talking about everything. Yes, there are certain sets of parameters and data you can get from non-Juniper switches also. The key is LLDP. If you have LLDP enabled on your switch, and as long as you have a Mist AP connected to the Juniper to the non-Juniper switches, we will be able to get a lot of data on it. So you will be able to see those functions of PoE, if you're running out of PoE or not, if you're running out if you missed out a VLAN, and if there is a non-compliance on your switch software level, etc. You will be able to do those from a non-Juniper switch also. So the key is, as long as you have an AP connected, a MIST AP connected to it, as long as you have LLDP configured on it, you will be able to get data, let it be from a Cisco switch, a Meraki switch, or Aruba, any vendor switch, as long as they support LLDP and a MIST AP is connected to it, you will be able to get some of those data related to missing VLANs, PoE related, software compliance. So there is quite a good amount of data because we understand a lot of our MIST APs may be connected to non-Juniper switches. We want to give you the value of that. The part we will be missing is you will not be able to do any configurations to the switches and all. For that, you obviously need the Juniper switches, and we use the netconf for SSH, and moving towards JTI in the future for the high-end switches to get the reach data. But at least you get the Marvis actions, you get to look into the missing VLANs, etc. Good question.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that probably would want to use the dashboard to configure other devices that don't come from Juniper.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So we talked a lot about managing and configuring the switches. We didn't talk much about the other side of the story, which is getting telemetry out of the switches and feed that data back into Marvis, right? So you can actually get more data and into the AI engine. One question I wanted to ask is, how do you guys get that data out of the switches? Do you still use the same SSH session, or do you use other type of protocol to get some telemetry data out of the switch?
Yes, absolutely. We use the same tunnel which we have built for this to get the data. So we will we don't have any other channel. It's only one channel which is formed between the data source of the switches, and it's the same thing we use for configuration of the switches, as well as getting the telemetry data over the netconf over SSH tunnel. So all in one single tunnel. You don't have to open up multiple ports, multiple destinations. Netconf over SSH is what we are using.
How much traffic would that take as you're gathering all this data from APs and switches? Because then you might have sites that don't have a big internet bandwidth, for example.
Absolutely. Very good question. A lot of customers are asking about it. It's in the range of very small, few kilobytes of data. We have done some characterizations and documented that in our website, and it's only a few kilobits of data which we are seeing over it. It's very low and very lightweight in terms of, we are not passing on hundreds and hundreds of megabytes of data. It's very low. It's in kilobits, what we are seeing over there. Even though the switch is loaded or not loaded with the clients, etc., the amount of data is very, very simple. And we're taking advantage of the facts that how can we, not get our data often from a box where we say that there's nothing changed in the box, so why get the data for the full box? We want to take advantage of getting the data only in an incremental scenario. That means either new users are connected or the users have dropped off from the network or disconnected on it. We want those type of data. So JTI gives us that power that we get the data only when there is a delta, whenever there is a change. So there is a baseline of configurations which we get, baseline of data which we get, and then on changes we can push data onto it. Say, for example, as I said, users drop off or not, we can figure out. And we have always the functions of throttling how often we get the data. Some data we might want to get every minute, some data maybe every 3 minutes, etc. So initially, when we started all of this, we were doing 1 minute of data polling, and then we saw that okay, that how can we overcome all this? So now we started moving towards the 3 minutes of data polling. So that's where we are making the changes continuously, but it's in one single channel.
Okay. And there's one thing that I haven't seen talked about, and that's quality of service. Since you're tying the switches into the dashboard and you have the APs there, is there going to be some integration or coexistence of what kind of quality of service is configured for wireless and tying that back to quality of service on the wired port?
Yeah, absolutely. The quality of service, if you look at it, is mostly now I've seen in customer configurations is done for sensitive applications. Say, for example, voice, right? Whenever we are doing any voice VLAN deployment, so we are adding features and functionalities where you can configure a particular port to be a voice VLAN, and if you configure it, we apply the standard QoS templates to it to expedite the traffic, etc. So that's what we are trying to work through. But yes, those configurations are coming where you can apply a port with a voice VLAN tag so that we can apply the standard COS, so class of service profiles to it. So that we are definitely going to on that. And then if you have your own COS configuration or class of service configuration, you will be able to apply that through the CLI templates and push it down to all your switches. So both options are available.
Okay. I think this has been a pretty good conversation and a good look into bringing switches into the dashboard and having this AI driven, I'm still getting used to it. It's just having it do work for us so we can focus on other things and not have to go into this rabbit hole of troubleshooting. But I know you guys have been, working with Juniper very closely. Have you seen them react in a way where they go, oh, so that's how that works over Wi-Fi? Because I know they're good at wired, but how are they with Wi-Fi in general?
Yeah, we had few instances about it. I think more of how it works in Wi-Fi is more on how a cloud is changing, how easily we can do configuration changes, how easily we can do patching, and how easily we can apply or bring in new features onto it. So I think that has been the change. What we are seeing is the taking advantage of the cloud and the microservices running on top of it, how easily we can push bug fixes when we detect it due to whatever reasons. As I said, Junos has so many levels of configuration, so many ways of doing configurations. We might be doing some configurations in some way, but it is not getting applied on a customer network, how we can change those. So I think that has been the learning curve on both sides on how the cloud is bringing in with the microservices and helping and getting into a better customer satisfaction.
Cool. I think that was a great discussion. Francois, you have anything you want to add before we end the show?
No, I really liked it. I'm a big fan. I think I'm going to become a big fan of the zero-touch provisioning thing. I can already see it being very useful, especially if you can detect, different devices being connected automatically. That's I think that's a great feature, and that's going to make everything easier when it comes to install deployments and maybe less issues to troubleshoot down the road.
Awesome. So guys, where can people go to find more if they want to learn more about this, and what should their next steps be if they want to try to check it out, implement it some way, or maybe move towards this model?
Absolutely. It's very easy, very, very easy. Just go to mist.com and look at one of the live demos, etc. And from there, you can create a Mist login and import your existing switches. There are always 90-day trials available, free trials available. And as well as we do wireless Wednesdays and calls, etc., where you can join and listen to some of the regular webinars. And from there, you can get qualified to get an AP, get a switch, and we are giving out those for next couple of months. So once you join their webinars and understand how we are implementing this, you will be able to get some switches, APs, etc. So it's very easy. Go to mist.com and you can sign up for this. And we are doing webinars, lots of webinars every week to start the knowledge, spread the knowledge of what we are doing in the wired, wireless, and the WAN world. One single pane of glass.
Yeah, so there's no excuse there to get access to this if you want to test it out and see what's coming, what's the changes coming to networking, wired and wireless, and how this could all integrate well together for single pane of glass for troubleshooting. But I want to thank you, Sujit, UC, and Abhi for joining us on the show to give us this information and helping us learn more about this.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
All right, so if you guys want to learn more, head over to the show notes page, cleartosend.net/238. That's where we'll have some show notes, some links. Maybe we'll include some photos because Francois and I have a Juniper switch. And so we've been trying to play with this and understand how this would look from a networking standpoint, a network engineer standpoint. So we'll try to provide more information there. But other than that, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.